On a freezing November night in the year 1120, the fastest ship in the English Channel rode straight into a rock. It carried roughly 300 people, including the only legitimate son of the King of England. By morning, one man was left alive, a butcher from Rouen clinging to wreckage in the dark. That single shipwreck did not just drown a prince, it erased a dynasty, plunged England into nearly 20 years of civil war, and changed the course of European history. And it happened because almost everyone on board was drunk. To understand why one ship mattered so much, you have to understand the man waiting on the far shore. King Henry I was the youngest son of William the Conqueror, and he ruled an empire that straddled the sea, England on one side, Normandy on the other. Henry was ruthless, brilliant, and obsessed with order. He had fathered more than 20 children, but under the law only 2 counted. His daughter Matilda, married off to the German emperor, and his son William Adelin, 17 years old, handsome, indulged, and heir to everything. Chroniclers said the boy was raised so softly he seemed destined to be, in their words, food for the fire. In November 1120, Henry had just crushed his rivals in France and secured the succession. His life's work was complete. All that remained was the short sail home. The fleet gathered at Barfleur on the Normandy coast. There, a captain named Thomas Fitzstephen approached the king with a special offer. His father had carried William the Conqueror across the Channel in 1066. Now Thomas offered Henry his own vessel, the White Ship, newly refitted, sleek, and reckoned the fastest afloat. Henry had already made his arrangements, but he handed the honor to his son. William Adelin and his glittering entourage came aboard, around 300 people, including some 140 knights and noblemen and at least 16 noblewomen. The cream of Anglo-Norman aristocracy, packed onto a single hull. The prince ordered wine brought aboard by the barrel. When priests arrived to bless the voyage, they were laughed away. The crew drank with the passengers. A few sober-minded souls saw where this was heading and quietly disembarked, among them the king's nephew, Stephen of Blois, who excused himself, reportedly suffering a bout of diarrhea. Remember that man. His upset stomach is about to alter history. The king's ship sailed at dusk. The White Ship stayed behind, drinking until well after dark. Then someone proposed a race. The fastest ship in the Channel could surely overtake the king. Thomas Fitzstephen, as drunk as his passengers, accepted. 50 rowers pulled with everything they had, and the White Ship shot out of the harbor at full speed, straight toward a notorious rock called the Quillebeuf, lurking just beneath the surface at the harbor's mouth. Every sober sailor in Barfleur knew it was there. The port side struck with a crack that echoed across the water. Timbers split. The ship swung, took on water, and began to go down within sight of the torches on shore. Onlookers heard the screams and could do nothing. In the chaos, the crew did manage one thing. They got Prince William into the ship's small boat and pushed him clear. The heir to England was rowing to safety when he heard a voice from the sinking wreck, his half-sister, Matilda, Countess of Perche, screaming for him not to abandon her. He ordered the boat turned around. As it came alongside, dozens of drowning people lunged for it at once. The little boat was swamped in seconds, and the prince went under with everyone else. Chroniclers say Captain Fitzstephen surfaced amid the wreckage and asked what had become of the king's son. Told that the prince had drowned, he chose to sink beneath the waves rather than face King Henry. When dawn came, the sole survivor was Berold, a butcher from Rouen, likely aboard to collect debts from the nobles, kept alive through the freezing night, it was said, by his thick sheepskin cloak. Of all the silk and armor on that ship, it was the poor man's coat that survived. For a full day, no one dared tell the king. Finally, they sent in a young boy who fell weeping at Henry's feet with the news. The chroniclers record that Henry collapsed with grief, and men said he never smiled again. But grief was only the beginning, because England now had no male heir. Henry spent his remaining years forcing his barons, twice, to swear oaths that they would crown his daughter Matilda. A woman on the throne was something Norman England had never accepted. The barons swore, and when Henry died in 1135, they broke their word almost immediately. The man who moved fastest was the very noble whose stomach trouble had taken him off the White Ship, Stephen of Blois. He raced across the Channel and had himself crowned before Matilda could act. What followed is remembered simply as the Anarchy, nearly 2 decades of civil war between Stephen and Matilda, from 1135 to 1153. Castles burned, rival courts taxed and plundered the same villages. One chronicler wrote that it was a time when Christ and his saints slept. The war only ended when both sides, exhausted, struck a deal. Stephen would keep the crown until his death, and then it would pass to Matilda's son. In 1154, that son became King Henry II, the first Plantagenet, founder of the dynasty that would rule England for over 300 years and give the world Richard the Lionheart, King John, and Magna Carta itself. All of it traces back to a drunken race in the dark and a prince who turned his boat around. History likes to hinge on great battles and grand designs, but sometimes it hinges on a barrel of wine, a submerged rock, and a case of diarrhea. If the White Ship clears the Quillebeuf, William Adelin is king, and the names we know, Plantagenet, Lionheart, Magna Carta, may never exist at all. One night in Barfleur Harbor redrew the future of Europe, and the only witness left to tell it was a butcher in a sheepskin cloak. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. There's a new deep dive every week.